Hey guys, I'm Katie Talbot with Singing Success, and I want to talk to you about head voice versus falsetto. We have a lot of people coming in thinking that it's the same thing. It is not. Head voice is actually a stronger connection, a stronger chord coordination than falsetto. Falsetto is that weak, airy, breathy. You love to hear it in soulful R&B songs, and head voice is going to be a little bit cleaner and a little bit more coordinated. So I wanted to give you a few exercises that I love to do when it comes to finding pure head voice. And for me, I need my consonants to push against. I need my defense mechanisms because, like I've said before, I love that heavy mix. I'm that soulful, falsetto, heavy, grungy voice, but I need to clean my voice out too. And a clean head voice, lightly connected, is what gets me there. So I'm going to show you the difference. So I'm going to start in a G, G, G. So that's a G, E, E, and I'm really going to get that chord coordination on that G. So I'm going to staccato it for a little bit. So I want G, 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 G. You hear that clean connection. G, 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 into my third. So you can hear the coordination in my voice. You hear that resonance is a little bit more forward. It's almost like that hooty owly sound, rather than Now when it comes to falsetto, it's great for style. Falsetto is great for style. It gives that airy, that breathy texture. When it comes to technique, we really want to get that clean coordination. So I'm going to show you the difference of in the G in that same exercise of falsetto so that you can hear the difference vocally between head voice and falsetto. So right here, it's a lighter connection. The chords there's really a lack of chord coordination when it comes to that. So if you're thinking, I'm gonna flip from, let's use Star Spangled Banner, and the rocket's red glare. That's not head voice, that's falsetto. That breathy texture is a lack of coordination in the chords, and that's a falsetto. Now again, great for style, but if that's all your head voice is, it's really important that you clean it out and get that clean coordination. And then the difference between for the head voice is, and the rocket's red glare. There's more of a coordination there. So that is head voice and falsetto, just to make it clear, because so many people get so confused thinking it's the same thing. It's not. If you still have any questions about head voice versus the falsetto voice, give us a call here. We will clarify everything for you. We'll work with you in your style and in the coordination, and get that falsetto in for style, but clean out that head voice when it comes to technique and growing your range.